My name is Mary Simani Bakio, as you have already known, and I am going to do a presentation on family law, domestic violence. It's a domestic violence presentation based on the laws in Vanuatu. This will be, it will be from, according to the order of this presentation. I will go first with the laws that govern domestic violence in Vanuatu, the purpose of this awareness, the definition of domestic violence, the purpose of domestic violence in Vanuatu, family protection order, who can apply for family protection order, and domestic violence restraining order, and then the conclusion. Laws regulating domestic violence in Vanuatu, we can find that on the Family Protection Act, number 28 of 2018. So, now the purpose of this awareness. The purpose of this awareness is to remind the general public that domestic violence is happening today and leading to broken homes and families. Also, there are cases where victims have lost their lives. Example, a death of a woman at Malapua, where her partner beat her to death. And also this week in Fiji, there was a young woman where her partner also assaulted her that led to her death. So domestic violence is against laws, and police, including us, the public, will have to support the victims affected by domestic violence in order to reduce domestic violence in Vanuatu. What is domestic violence? I know that more of us, or in our community, we've had a general a definition of domestic violence, but I've included some definition here so that it could also educate you and also educate me and the public as we talk about domestic violence. Domestic violence is violence committed by someone in the victim's domestic circle, which includes partners, ex-partners, immediate family members, and other relatives and family friends. The term domestic violence is used where there is a close relationship between the offender and the victim. There is usually a power gap between them, and the victim is dependent on the offender. There are many types of domestic violence, but there are main 4 types happening in our communities in Vanuatu, and they are physically domestic violence, or emotional, financial, sexual violence, which are very common in our society. This is a clear picture of physical violence. A woman being beaten by the husband, and she had scratches or black eye on her right side of the eye. Physical violence. As you can see this picture, this is a very clear picture of physical violence. And physical violence is when someone punch, slap, kick, or use a weapon that can cause injury to another person. So when your husband slap you, or when you slap your children, or when you as a mother slap your husband, because domestic violence goes both ways. It's not only women, as we often hear in the society and in our communities. Domestic violence happens both ways, in a woman and in a man, but more often men are perpetrators of domestic violence in our families, in our communities, and everywhere where we live. Now, emotional violence. Emotional violence is where someone calls another person by an animal's name or uses other words against them to hurt their feeling. It also includes the act of falsely blaming other person over something, or threatening or using sign language to threaten another person. So here is a picture I got online just to show what emotional violence is. We call people names, like we call our children lazy, or we call our husbands lazy, or our husbands, they call us wives lazy, or like you're very bad, or you're dumb, or you're stupid, or we use very aggressive words that could affect us emotionally. So at home, if your spouse is doing that, or if you are doing that to your children, you should refrain from such action, because that is considered as domestic violence under emotional violence. Sexual violence. Sexual violence involves forcing someone for sex without their consent. It involves assaulting someone and forces them for sexual purposes. Family members and children are some of the main victims of sexual violence. I would like to bring to our attention a husband and wife relationship, because we are married, so we often believe that, okay, whenever our husband wants to have sexual intercourse, we have to render them. But sometimes when your wife is sick or she's not willing and you force your wife to have sex with you, that is sexual violence. Because you have to ask your wife or ask your partner whether they are willing to engage in sexual intercourse. If only she said yes, if it's between consensual of two people, then yes. But without the consent of the other person, whether you're a female or you're a male, it will be classified as sexual domestic violence. Because you cannot just allow another person to do whatever you demand for them to do. It has to be consented. The other person has to say yes. Don't take it negatively as a husband and wife relationship. It is always good to talk about things. It's always good that you speak to your partner when you are sick, or tell your husband that, no, I am not feeling well today, I wouldn't be able to sleep with you or have sexual intercourse with you. And your husband must understand and not take it in a different manner, because sometimes men, they tend to think that when women say no, they are having another extramarital relationship. No, that is not always the case. So we have to understand each other. Statistic report about domestic violence in Vanuatu. A statistical report has revealed that there is a strong link between partner violence and children's exposure to violence. About more than 55% of women in Vanuatu have been experiencing physical violence by their spouse, partners, and their children who witness, and are more likely to show acceptance to violent behavior and may become victim in the future. This is a common trend. When children experience violence when they are young, in the near future or in the future, they can be one of those victims, again, of domestic violence. It's what they call a repeat psychology. It happens. Not always we say that 100%, but in some way, one or the other, it will happen to a victim when they are young, and they can be victim of domestic violence in the future. And research also indicates that violence is a learned behavior, and children who experience and witness violence between parents may accept that violence is appropriate and copy this childhood experience when in adult relationship. Like I said, children who experience this, they might be a perpetrator in the future, or they might be the victim of domestic violence in the future. It goes both ways. And the report has more than 50% of the children in Vanuatu who are violent in school and communities today, and communities today are children who are victims of violence at home. Know the signs of domestic violence. I've included a picture. It says, action, change things. There's a picture on our right-hand side. We cannot see the other part of the words, but it's action, change things. Know the signs. Domestic violence can happen to anyone, whether I am white or black, whether I'm black, young, old, rich, poor, educated, and not educated. Sometimes violence begins early on in a relationship, and other times it takes months or even years to appear. But there are generally some signs, some warning signs that you will see in a person with a domestic violence relationship. So be wary of the following red flag as an abuser may exhibit at any point in time in a relationship. First, being jealous of your friends or time spent away from your partner. So when you see your spouse or your partner, the person does not accept you, or does not, he is intimidated or feel jealous when you are away from him or her, or when you are gone out with your friends or family. Be aware of your surrounding. Sometimes, normally we take this because in our society, sometimes we even hear our parents, they say, oh, that is normal in a relationship, your spouse will be jealous. It is normal in a relationship, but this is like a red flag that you have to be aware. When your spouse constantly is jealous of you and, you know, constantly telling you, you cannot go here, you have to be aware. You start ticking a block. Okay, he is this kind of person, or she is this kind of person, but has this kind of attitude. Be aware, make noise, or make signs, or try and seek legal help, or go and speak to your parents. Speak to a pastor that will help you, or give you advice, or counsel you, so that you can be aware of what's happening in your surrounding. But if you see this sign, and then you just let go of it, then you are in trouble. That is why we put up awareness, so that the public, or women, or children, or spouse, husbands, they be aware of a sign and prevent bad things from happening to them and their children and family. Don't ignore. After you've seen those signs happening in your relationship, or at home, or your spouse doing to you or to your children, don't ignore it. Police officers hear the same thing from witnesses again and again. I saw, I heard, perceived domestic violence, but didn't want to get involved. If you hear your neighbors engage in a violent situation, call the police. It could save lives. For us in Vanuatu, you cannot just go and report. If I see a domestic violence, a man hitting the wife on the road, I cannot just stand up and report him straight away to the police. I have to get the consent of the person, of the victim, and the person has to tell me verbally or write a consent, and then I will take it to the police and report it to the police. But either way, do go out there and help somebody. Lend an ear to a friend. If someone ever confides in you that they are experiencing domestic violence, listen without judgment. More often, we always try to draw conclusion in the lives of victims, but we should learn to listen and not to judge them, and give them a helping ear and help them. Nobody else knows. It's only them and the victim, where they protect the victim from their spouse trying to attack them or trying to do more harm to them. Escape plans, or set up necessity like bank accounts and sell. Keep whatever he or she has told you confidential. Also, it's good to write it down in case where you end up in police, or in case if that domestic violence case is reported to the police and you will end up in court, you have written everything that happened in black and white, and you can also use that later in court as an evidence to help support the claim of the victim. And get the word out. That is one of our major problems in a society, in a church, in our family, is that when we hear someone who's affected by domestic violence, we just keep it to ourselves. No, spread the word out, get the word out, assist them, and tell them that, okay, you can get help from here, or you can go here and seek help from here. And organize talks at your workplace, exactly what we're doing here, where we do awareness and we educate people, because in me educating you of domestic violence, you can go home and educate your children, and your children can educate other children, and it's not only a one-person job. I am touching 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lives today. And then you will multiply by going home and telling other people. It is not only a one-man job, it is a multiplication of a group work of people that we can go out and talk about domestic violence. And who can apply for family protection order? An application for a family protection order may be made by the complainant, the victim, or a friend, like I've already said, a friend or the family member on behalf of the complainant, if the complainant has given his or her oral consent for the friend or family members to take the application. If only the victim has given consent to a family member, then the family member can report or lodge the complaint. Because in Vanuatu, when someone witnesses an incident, it has to be consented by the victim. You cannot just go and report to the police without the consent of the victim. You have to get the consent. Also, a legal qualified petitioner on behalf of the complainant, if the complainant has given his or her oral written consent for the petitioner to make the application, like a legal lawyer. And D, a police officer on behalf of the complainant, if the complainant has given his or her oral written consent for that officer to make the application, the Family Protection Order. These are the penalties for a guilty person who's committed the act of domestic violence. I also put Fiji there, but we will look at the Vanuatu penalty. The perpetrator will be punishable on conviction by term of imprisonment not exceeding 5 years. Send the person to prison for 5 years or less than 5 years according to the harm that the perpetrator has caused to the victim, or the court can fine the person 100,000, or the court can say both. You fine, and then you can also go to prison. And on the other side is the penalty under Domestic Violence Decree of Fiji. Conclusion. Domestic violence or violence against women and children occurs every day and everywhere. It is a damaging impact on society, undermining stability and progress. But violence against women and children is not evitable, but it is preventable. We can prevent it if we refuse to let violence remain in the shadows. Both perpetrators and victims need help to learn a better way. If you are a victim of abuse in any of these areas where I just mentioned and we've gone through in the presentation, I urge you to seek help. I also encourage all families, men, women, and children to take the time to talk about domestic violence. So now you've heard about the presentation of domestic violence. I encourage you to go there into your communities, to your church, to your families, to your spouse and children, and also educate them of what we have just learned today. And make your home a violence-free place to teach your children good habits. If you see someone being abused, don't just look the other way. There are ways which you can confidentially report the issue or speak to the victim or perpetrator about it. We all need to work together to end domestic violence and make Vanuatu a safe, equal, and just society for all. Thank you all for your attendance. We hope that whatever information we have received and learned today, we will go out there and save a life of a victim of domestic violence.